Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of God. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 64, and probably our last look at Odysseys of Light by Marilyn Hughes. That minor classic from 1991. Marilyn does have a web presence that you can check, and there is much on her site. But this was her first book, as far as I know. And I think it's quite useful to all of you in your fleshing out your own paths, as it were. She talked about Emmanuel being one of her guides, or a Emmanuel. And there are more, as the book goes on, more actual channeling sessions with him. And this sections of this one here, I think, is quite interesting in the questions that they ask. Talking about Marilyn, Andy, and daughter Melissa. Oh, Emmanuel. Oh, we will all survive. Your wife has the presence of mind to know of her own weaknesses. Many people are not willing to recognize their twin nature. Through great trial and tribulation, your wife has been able to resolve that many of her problems with the child are related to herself. You have probably noticed that your wife is growing to a more whole and loving being. It is all a game, and we all win. Along the way, Marilyn will grow tremendously, and because of that, Melissa will also benefit. She needs it because of the trauma she suffered in Vietnam. With her return to Earth, Melissa made a careful selection, and she wanted to grow in this lifetime. Because both of you have the courage to face the issues and learn, you will work through that anger and be able to treat each other in more loving ways. Andy, can you tell us what happened to her in Vietnam? Emmanuel, give me a few moments to access. She suffered a great deal. As you know, she was a man in that life, and someone she loved greatly blew up before her eyes. Someone she might have married. There is great sadness as she is crying over the body, or what is left of it. It would not be beneficial to go into this further. Andy, both of us had a dream. Marilyn, a past life experience that somehow involved the mob. Could you comment on that? Emmanuel, it was a past life. Andy, I've always felt a strong connection. Emmanuel, with the 20s and 30s, yeah. You were there and she was there. Did we know each other? Yes, but not for long. As you were both killed, you died very young. Both of us? You died together. Can you tell us any more, like who killed us? A separate mob family. In a surprise attack, you were both shot. We were members of a mob family? You were, but your wife wasn't. The marriage to you brought her into the family. Could you tell us why Melissa chose to experience all this sadness and suffering in her past life? She needs to learn to confront, as this has been a problem for her in all her lives. Vietnam was a very extreme environment. What do you mean by learning to confront? She has always been a conformist and cannot go against consensus reality. Like many of us, she wants to be accepted. I feel like my father really suffers from that, and I do too. It's very common. However, it is important to accept your own self for what you are. Before you accept yourself, you never truly accept others. I seem to shun away from telling others about my growth in the spiritual plane. It is your fear of not being accepted. In order to grow, you must let that grow. Accepting that in your growth, you will leave others behind. Until you realize that your growth is more important than acceptance, you will stagnate. Telling others will light a spark of remembrance that may or may not be followed up. Just as others express their Christianity or other religion as their way of life, you should express your truths as part of you. Do not hide your reality, as hiding inhibits. I guess that is one way to grow. Any other suggestions? Emmanuel, desire and meditation. Marilyn really feels the desire and you do not. So, some important points there. Learning to give up your mainstream acceptance as you move into more mystical and mysterious states of consciousness. You will find that happening. And you have your own choice about what you want to do. Hang on to the consensus reality, be accepted, or move out on your own. A little later, in the same dialogue, Andy, what do we on this planet Earth have in store for us in the future? Will we destroy ourselves? Emmanuel, depends on your perception of destruction. Nuclear annihilation will not occur, but there could be ecological destruction. Mother Earth will never be completely destroyed by man, as the Earth will decide when she is ready to return to God and complete the cycle herself. Consensus consciousness is not good at this time, and a lot of tragedies that occur are a result of that. I certainly agree with that. It seems more and more of our world leaders are becoming more greedy and selfish. Emmanuel, most world leaders are inherently young souls, as they are the ones who require the power, ambition, and fame due to their overdeveloped egos. Should Marilyn continue to channel you, and are you the same entity who works with Pat Rodegast, who wrote Emmanuel's book? If you don't know that, that was a popular channeled book in the 80s and 90s. Quite famous in my mind for its pithy replies, unlike people like Seth who just waffle on for pages and pages. Emmanuel had this ability to sum up profound metaphysical points and states in a few lines, which I just loved. Anyway, he was very important, very sort of popular at the time. Emmanuel, yes, I am. I have worked with many beings throughout time, and for selfish reasons, yes, I would like Marilyn to allow me to channel through her. Why did Marilyn choose to have the health problems she is presently experiencing? Most disease comes as a result of a denial of love, the fear of being totally loved. Some do it because they are ready to move on. Marilyn feels too responsible for other people, and she needs to learn just to be. There is a positive aspect to her illness, as it has forced her to be introspective and spurred her communication with us in the spiritual realm. She sometimes thinks that because she is tired too much that something is wrong. However, we are just bringing her into our realms to communicate and teach to her. Now some more personal experiences. In an astral thought form, I was working with a spiritual theatre group playing many different parts. Trying every possible role, I could not find one that was right for me. The directing entity, a being manifesting as a middle-aged balding man of less than average height, asked me to return for the next play. Willing myself away, I found myself in a beautiful astral crystal shop. Shimmering white crystals covered the ceilings, walls, and floor, and I sat in a corner soaking up the intense vibrations. All the crystals were huge, like stalactites in that form in caverns, and their energy pulsated my being for several minutes. Knowing it was time to return to a theatre group, I willed myself back. The stage was filled with dancers, and they performed a drama about human nature. Two beings watched from their tables in the restaurant below the stage, and the actors were disappointed at the small showing. When I entered the backstage area, the director ran to me holding a white flowing costume. It is the age of Aquarius, and you are the Aquarian. You must play this part, as it comes naturally to you. Recognizing my role, I smiled and took the costume. Everyone in the theatre group was excited, as this was the play we had been waiting for, and its time had come. Returning to my body, I awoke. Traveling through the time tunnel, I entered into the body of a Western woman living on a prairie ranch. A lot of Western frontier Indian past lives, eh? Interesting. I had light brown hair and wore a blue flower print dress with a matching bonnet. A small, thin man with long, black, wavy hair stood next to me. He was my husband. He wore a weathered cowboy hat and brown leather pants and a vest. Our two children were inside, a 4-year-old little girl with long blonde hair and a 2-year-old boy with dark brown hair and a bobby cut. My husband and I were walking away from our small 3-room cabin with a pillared porch. 2 farmhands were working with the animals and we walked toward them. Galloping horses were heard in the distance, and before we could look up and respond, gunfire rang out on our peaceful ranch. 3 outlaws sped through our home, killing the 2 workmen and myself. Watching from above, my husband was walking away from a freshly dug grave. 1 child on each side. I felt I could move on. Feeling certain he would take good care of our kids, I sent them thought forms and love and sped towards the light. Recovered from that tragedy quickly, didn't she? Here's her first channeling of Emmanuel in a social or public situation. Speaking with a group of about 15 people, Emmanuel came through with his loving being. Hello, this is Emmanuel. Yes, it is. Emmanuel, can you tell us where you're from? I am from every place and no place. I am here and I am there. I can exist in all realities. Have you been physical ever? Yes, I have. Was it on the earth plane? Yes. Did you go through regular incarnations that we go through, or did you experience Earth one time? I experienced Earth like all of you. It took me a bit of time. Emmanuel, I'd really like to open up more to channeling and communication with my guides. Could you give me suggestions as to what might help me open up? There is fear that you are not aware of which blocks you. Your guides love you very much and desire to communicate with you. Ask them to help you identify your fears so that you may work through them. Thank you. You're welcome. Question. How can I achieve the things I want to achieve, and how am I blocking the achievements that I desire? The question I would ask you is, what do you desire to achieve? Questioner. There are many things, and it is hard to pinpoint just one. Are these physical or spiritual? Both. How about spiritual? May I ask you what spiritual things you would like to achieve in the now at this point in time? At this point, I would like to be in the now at all times. Then the question answers itself. If you want to achieve all your desires, you must truly experience the now at all times. Allow yourself to enjoy the absence of pressure to reach the end of your path. Perceive everything along your path, and you will realize that the finish line is not your goal. It is the path. Desire it, and it will happen. Thank you. You're welcome. I would like to ask what drew me here tonight. I did not want to come, but something made me feel as if I should. When I met Marilyn, I felt a strong connection. Well, there are no coincidences. You and Marilyn have met in a previous life. Explore it. May I say that you were brothers? But I like my brother in this life. Give Marilyn a chance. Group laughing. In terms of what you were drawn here for, Marilyn has a lot of experience on the astral plane, and we have dragged her through the mud, should I say. You have a desire to experience that, and she can help you. What was Jesus Christ's message, and how and why was it distorted? Jesus' real message was that all the knowledge of the universe is within each and every one of us. It was distorted because of fear. People wanted to create a persona of a being greater than they, and that was an illusion, as he is one with us. Jesus Christ came to help you unleash all that you are within your own being. And, more of the same. And it goes on for quite a few pages and a lot of things that'll, similar to a lot of channels. I just wanted you to see how a channeler sort of slowly moves toward a physical being like Marilyn and waits for her comfort level to be appropriate for an actual live channeling. It takes a while, and it certainly took me a while to channel Maitreya, as I did early on in public spaces. And some of that's in the book, the early channelings in Jesus and the Christ book. And it took me a while to throw away my doubt, realize my worthiness, or realize my block that I had from lack of worthiness, and other issues. Why me, why now, those kind of things. And a lot of that, all that's covered in More Adventures in Eternity. I began channeling for a group and found myself becoming fearful. Afraid of being exposed or disliked, it was slowing me down. Flying about Earth, out of body, my guides left me in an ugly ghetto. The streets were full of litter, a few condemned homes were scattered along the street, and a bare parking lot had become the hangout for a local gang. Feeling vulnerable, my fear was intense. Some of the gang members started walking towards me, and I began to tremble. Suddenly I realized that there was nothing to fear, as they could not see me and I could fly away. Jutting up toward the sky, I exited the ghetto and headed for the astral plane. See how the identification is still not complete. She doesn't know that she's in her astral body, not 100%. And results in fear. And as you go through your own journey, you will find this sort of thing happening. In different situations, of course. But all it really takes is practice and an understanding that, yes, you are in your astral body and the old physical rules do not apply. Battling down a small walkway, I looked around at the hundreds of entities enjoying themselves. I had entered an astral plane park, which contained park benches, trees, and little meeting areas. Oh, lots of those. The Monroe Institute people have the Park and Focus 27, which is a beautiful, wonderful space for souls without any particular belief system connection, but there are plenty of others. Feeling safe, I walked along enjoying the scenery when a female entity approached me. "You channel Emmanuel. Would you channel him for me and my friends?" Dragging me to a picnic table underneath a shade tree, she introduced me to her 3 friends, who immediately responded with excitement. "Wow, I'm so honored to be in your presence. You must be a great being to channel Emmanuel." Responding meekly, I tried to tell them I was no different than they, but was interrupted. "Will you teach us to be enlightened like you?" Feeling uncomfortable, I told them that they had misunderstood Emmanuel's message. We are all one, and the answers lie within yourself. The female entity asked some questions about Emmanuel's message. "Don't you think that unconditional love is impossible to attain? And if we are always experiencing the now, then what about the future?" Getting angry at these beings who were violating my sacred relationship with Emmanuel, I started to speak, but stopped. The female entity began to smile, and her aura of purple and green becoming distinct. She changed her manifestation to that of Emmanuel. "It's you!" I shouted at him as I laughed at my own delusion. Emmanuel responded, "You fear exposing yourself and being scrutinized. You fear being called a teacher. It scares you to think that others may try to give their power away to you and expect you to know their answers. But most of all, you fear the expectation of proof. The answer is simple. Be. If you do not take another's power, they cannot give it. And if they desire proof, they do not desire the truth." Boy, have I run into that one a few times. Sometimes in public media like radio. Pointing in another direction, he told me to follow the path. He stood and disappeared. Walking along, I noticed a holographic image of my husband up ahead. The image was being rude to an entity for whom I had great respect. Running up to the entity, I apologized for my husband's behavior. He didn't mean it. He often overreacts. But the entity wanted nothing more to do with the wife of someone so rude. I remembered this was a fear of mine. My husband had used this type of manipulation to interfere with my friendships, and I was afraid he might do it to my new friends in the metaphysical community. Continuing down the path, my little girl joined me. We flew together for a short while, and then I focused my attention to what lay ahead. Exiting the park, I planned to re-enter my body. Looking to my side, my child was no longer there, and I panicked. I returned to the park and found her being tended to by other entities. Quickly picking her up, I took her back to the earth plane. My fear was not of not meeting my child's needs, and it was important that I evaluate whatever work I chose so that my baby doll would have plenty of love. Contemplating this visit, I evaluated my fears and vowed to overcome them. Andy acknowledged his manipulative behavior and joined with me in our goal to remove it. Another sort of teaching dream. Guides will often do that, trick you. Some of my guides, as I talk about More Adventures in Eternity, would hide in crowds. I'd be out looking if I could find them. And this is when I was in my needy phase, feeling that I really needed a guide and a teacher. Eventually you get over that. But, it's, as I say, it's described in detail in More Adventures in Eternity. And some pretty funny stuff happened in that phase. Not everyone has trickster guides, but quite a few of us do, and I certainly did. Flying through the dimensions, I happened upon the plane of inspiration and creativity. A totally white dimension beings performed their musical visions of light on podiums scattered all about the space. Astral instruments, some resembling those that we have on Earth and others very different, produced a beautiful sound unattainable in the physical realm. The melodies meshed together to form celestial sounds of unimaginable excitement. Walking along the white pathways, I noticed a sax player engulfed in his music. Entranced by his song, I stopped to listen. I didn't really immediately recognize this entity, but he was a stockpile friend. The stockpile of hurts and wounds from friends she talked about before. Finishing up, he came to talk to me, and we embraced in the happiness at seeing each other again. The stockpile visit was for him, however, as I was the one who had hurt him. He had been engaged to my best friend for years, who suddenly left him for another man and got married. Torn between loyalties, I lost touch with him. In our embrace, he knew I had meant him no harm. Feeling the love I had for him, he had no need to ask questions. I had cherished our friendship, and he could not deny that feeling. Smiling, he returned to his sax playing, the love evident. Traversing the mystical walkway, I listened to the soulful sounds of the celestial beings I passed, and then returning to my body, I awoke. There are certainly planes of creativity, no question of that. All the arts, you name it, it all goes on there. Dancing is particularly wonderful because they can sort of leap and float around. There's almost no gravity, and you can obviously anyone can fly, but to fly gracefully like a ballet dancer and do loops and all sorts of interesting things, that takes practice, and that goes on there. Let me tell you, it does. Wonderful stuff it is too. Parting with my body a few days later, I returned to the creative zone accompanied by a female entity who I perceived as a guide. We were going to perform in a trio together. Coming upon an empty podium where we were to play, a beautiful Indian being walked up, the third in our trio. My guide played the flute and I was to play the bassoon, but I couldn't. Mesmerized, I stared at the Indian with beautiful black hair and olive skin. A bit stocky, he was not very tall. The two began to play, and a third entity came in to take my place on the bassoon. As they played, understanding came. This beautiful Indian was a middleman between me and my Indian master. Celestial music filling my being, the male and female entity smiled and disappeared, leaving me with the Indian. Putting his arm around me, he led me down the corridors of light, which were tunnel-like hallways that glowed with white light. As I was so happy to be with this entity, I began to cry tears of joy. His energy filled me with peace. A thought-form Indian woman appeared with a small baby, his wife and child. They disappeared quickly, and I realized he was showing me our connection to each other. Entering a small private room, we both lay down together in what appeared to be nothing. You want to experience what it means to be. I will show you what beingness is. Lay your head on my shoulder and be. Doing as he said, I felt the most intense love, peace, and joy I'd ever experienced. Superlatives get worn out quickly when you're describing astral experiences. I once went through a year where I tried to not ever use the word astonish again because I've been using it so much. Doing as he said, I felt the most intense love, peace, and joy I'd ever experienced. My being pulsated with love and light, and I could not be more content. As we enjoyed being together, other entities would pop by, smiling and leaving when they realized we were being. There was such great respect given to us in our state of being, whereas in the physical plane, you're expected to always be doing something. Sharing and receiving energy, we lay there for hours, and I had no desire to do anything else. When we finished, we both headed down another corridor of light. It is important for you to receive these energies so that you will be able to meet with the Indian master, he said. Entering a large white crowded room, he took me over to a bookshelf. Opening a book about Indians, he said, "My name is Cheyenne, as I was a Cheyenne Indian. I will call you Ute." With a hug, he bid me to return to my body. Attending an astral support group on a beach, two gals and a guy were discussing their latest crisis. Sitting quietly, I did not participate. One of the women began to speak of her late boyfriend who had been murdered a few weeks earlier. "I don't know what to do. I want to avenge his death, but I just don't know what's right." The other woman began to respond, but suddenly looked up to me and said, "Well, what do you think she should do?" Looking at the woman with as much compassion and understanding as I could muster, I responded, "It would be difficult to tell you anything at this time as it happened so recently. However, the most loving thing you can do is to let him go. This is his past life now, and he needs you to allow him the space to move on. Everything that happened was planned, and you need to put it all in the hands of God." Disintegrating, I passed through the time tunnel and into another lifetime. Working in a Russian shop, I was a young boy in my teens. I worked with an older man who wore an apron and leaned forward with a hunch. Running a manual machine making horse reins, I was his apprentice. The shop supplied all the needs for horses and sleighs. As the snow fell hard in the high country, the horse and sleigh were our main transportation. Moments later, I was dropped into a beautiful sleigh which was pulled by two light brown Clydesdale horses. The snow was falling and the forest floor was a blanket of white. Enjoying the ride, we followed the path through the woods. Pulled from my scene, I flew through the tunnel and entered my body. Cruising through the time tunnel, I entered into the body of a pregnant Oriental woman. It appeared to be the early 20th century. The man was with me, white, tall, and muscular with brown hair, and we were lovers. Giving birth to twins, I planned to raise them alone. A few days after their birth, one of the twins was kidnapped by his father, who sold him for money. Dropped into a point 2 years later, I tracked down my former boyfriend at university, and with a little effort, found that he had given the child to a professor and his wife. Sitting in the speaker's hall, listening to the professor give a speech, I turned to leave and saw my former boyfriend. Confronting him and the professor, he admitted his guilt, and the professor returned the child to me. Gee, that was simple. Pulled out of the body, I was watching from above. The former lover appeared next to me asking for forgiveness. Realizing that this was a past life stockpile situation, I told him that I had forgiven him long ago. Feeling a strong love from him, he said, "I never forgot you and I always regretted what I did. You taught me how to love and I will be forever grateful for that." Responding with a hug, I told him I understood and had loved him very much too. Going through the tunnel, there was more to do. Waiting in a realm with a very high vibrational level, I noticed a pale blue color seemed to permeate the entire dimension. Suddenly a distant voice could be heard. It was my Indian master. Unable to understand his voice, I felt crushed by the power of his high vibration. Not yet ready to meet him, I returned to my physical body. After speaking with Red Jacket about getting together and doing something fun, he took me out of my body and to a snow-covered mountain. Flying up the hill, sometimes permeating the snow, and other times flying so high into the heavens that we could see the whole of the earth. Oh, that sounds like fun, doesn't it? We enjoyed ourselves immensely. The snow was very deep and we travelled through caverns, up rocks and by trees. When we reached the top, we flew down like sleigh riders with no need for a sleigh. After we were through partying, Red Jacket took me to the empty space dimension and left me all alone. Surrounded by spirits from my mob lifetime, I began to feel frightened. They did nothing and their inaction made me feel nervous. Over time, I calmed down, realizing that there was no immediate danger. One of the entities spoke. "We want you to know that we are very sorry that we killed you and your husband. As you know, our actions came as a result of our illusion, and we have all grown and evolved since that time. We do love you very much, and we hope that you can forgive us and let this go." Understanding that there were no threat to anyone anymore, I thanked them for taking the time to work this out for me. Forgiving them, I returned to the physical. An interesting karmic twist occurred on another occasion when I travelled through the time tunnel into a Roman life with Red Jacket. In this life, I was the prisoner. Entering into the body of a dark-haired woman, I saw a gorgeous man with blonde hair at my side. It was the being Red Jacket. He was a guard at a slave camp for women, and very muscular and tall. Angry and resisting, I had just been captured and brought to this place. The place was built very sparsely, as they only provided minimum needs for the prisoners. This was part of an illegal slave operation, and the women were sold to wealthy men. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Do things change? No. To make it even more profitable, they had the women working in the fields until they were sold. Oh, yeah, maximize that profit. And they could sell their crops to the faraway towns. This would be their downfall, as people would become suspicious as the source of their crops and would take action. The gorgeous guard had a reputation for fooling around with a lot of the female inmates, and one night he came to visit me in my hut-like cell. Telling him I wasn't interested, we ended up talking all night long and becoming very close. It didn't take long for us to fall in love, and as a result, my life became a lot easier. Surprised that he had fallen for a woman this way, he became very protective of me and made sure I didn't get sold. One of his jobs was to provide water from the well, and in order to get me out of field work, he had me help him. Out of nowhere, the camp was attacked by soldiers, and someone had figured out that these guys were kidnapping women and selling them as slaves. Women were running everywhere trying to escape during the uproar, and after waiting a short time for my man to come, I decided I must go too. Frantically running out of the camp, I heard his voice calling me. Turning, he motioned me to return, but several other guards were running after us. This was my only chance, and I took it. He stayed to defend his world, and I took off to find out what was left of mine. Popping out of the body, I saw him sitting in my hut, an incredible sadness showing on his face, a lone teardrop falling on his cheek. Returning to my body, I pondered this little karmic twist. These things happen. Slaves, masters, prisoners, the whole... I think you know that already, but it's good to be confirmed, isn't it? Cruising out of my body, I went to a large space on the astral plane for 2 conventions of subconscious astrals. In the first convention, about 100 people from my high school class showed up, and I began to speaking of truth. Telling them that they could venture inward and do wonderful things, they responded with some religious tenets of the Catholic Church. When told that they could astral project, they began to immediately laugh. "What are you, some kind of nut? That astral projection stuff is a bunch of garbage." Smiling at them, I replied, "Is that so? Well, would it make it any clearer if I told you that you're all out of your bodies right now?" In a wild state of panic, several entities noticed their transparent nature. Well, that's a great line. In a wild state of panic, several entities noticed their transparent nature. You see that in a movie? Wouldn't that be hilarious? "Oh my God, how will I get back to my body?" Calming them, I told them to will themselves home and they would be fine. The next group was a gay convention, and they were much more open to reality. Well, yeah, gays usually are. As I stood on the podium and talked of truth, They cheered with the enthusiasm of a crowd at a Super Bowl game. After a while of discussing astral projection and unconditional love, I left the scene for a well-deserved rest. Red Jacket picked me up and took me to the northern polar ice cap. As you feel no temperature in astral body, it was not cold. Sliding on ice and into the water, we had a great time for several hours. After jumping in some snowdrifts, Red Jacket led me home to my body. Oh, here's one more. Out of my body, I went to an eerie old mansion where a man named Sam lived. Sam was a musician and he sold insurance as a cover for his illegal activities. Isn't that great, selling insurance as a cover? The two great loves in his life were his Great Dane dog and whalefish. Once in a while he dabbled in astral travel but never left the earth plane. Watching Sam, I realized I was one of his spirit guides, and he was one of the souls I worked with in between lives. See? She discovers she's a guide in between lives, and you could be too. Traveling a lot, Sam spent a little time in his home. His two best friends, a young couple, took care of the place while he was away. Simple people, they did it because of their friendship for Sam. They didn't care for the mansion and enjoyed a less complicated life. Sam had left the two in charge of the house for a couple of weeks, and he was running late in his return. The woman had a dream that Sam had died, and she called some people to confirm. Dying in his sleep, his will left everything he owned to the couple. Surprised, they didn't really want it. Deluged with lawyers and agents, everyone wanted to disavow Sam's will and get in on the estate. Some were saying that Sam was crazy because of interest in astral travel. Others complained of the care that the couple had given the home. Well, of course. So typical, fighting over the inheritance. In a dream, the woman received a phone call from the spirit world. Sam wanted them to have the estate because he knew they would do something good with it. Having a new perspective, Sam wanted the home to be used for something worthwhile. The same night, everyone involved gathered, subconscious astral, in the huge auditorium of the house. Planning on being born in his new lifetime as a nun within a few hours, Sam wanted this to be resolved. I assured him that everything would be okay, and we joined the group. Manifesting as a medium-sized white man in my 20s, I walked in and spoke to the group about astral projection. Their reaction was one of disbelief, and they were not aware that I was a spirit. Don't forget, these are subconscious astrals. There's a lot of that goes on. People are doing stuff, subconscious astral, out of their bodies, and they don't even know it. It's just bizarre. You always have to wake them up somehow, shock them. And appearing to the group, Sam flew about the room to gauge their reactions. Some of the people blocked, but most were seeing through their own window of perception. Just then, I soared toward the sky, flying about the room. Spreading love energy to everyone, I began to speak. Your physical world is an illusion. All there is unconditional love. You are not judged, and there is no hell. Fear is what allows you to deny this. Sam wants these two people to have this property, as they will do something with it that is valuable. To deny this is to deny your own illusory laws. All there is love. After landing from my love flight, a short, bent-over man came to me in tears and embraced my being. Surprised but undaunted by my lack of physical form, the tears flowed in a glowing confirmation of the love of God. Spending a moment to be with this man, we shared energies, and I left the earth plane. The estate was settled the next day, and the couple donated the huge mansion to the Catholic Church to become an orphanage. Changing his mind, Sam decided to become a priest and was born a boy. 4 years later, Sam's parents died in an accident, and he was taken to the Catholic orphanage. Looking around the huge home, Sam came upon a maintenance man. What was this building used for before it became an orphanage, he asked. A very rich man owned this house, and he lived here all alone, he replied. But why would anyone want to live in a house this big all by themselves, Sam asked. The maintenance man shrugged his shoulders to say he did not know, and Sam continued. Well, I'm glad that the old man realized that this place could be a good home for people like us. It's fun having all my friends live here with me sharing everything. My job finished, I flew off and returned to my present existence. Yes, there's more. Thank you, Marilyn Hughes, for those extended lessons in consciousness expansion. I certainly enjoyed them, despite knowing much of the material. It's always fun to see how other people do things. And I would mention that this whole stockpile of past hurts and meeting people to sort of take this one log of hurt off your stockpile so that there's none left, because that stockpile is acting as an anchor to your ship of state as you move towards unconditional love, is a very interesting sort of concept and series of experiences. I've never seen it expressed quite that way before, and in all my reading anyway. And for that alone, Marilyn's work is very valuable. And within a couple of days, we'll be on to something else. Such is the magnitude or the plethora or the wondrous stockpile of OBE books. And until then, so long.